Right, so the Tories have been telling porkies about a deal they've apparently struck. A grand breakthrough over the Northern Ireland Protocol at last. Haha, what success! But as I say, porkies and the media are in on it with them too. Having Brexited, a hard border either had to go back up between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, or we put a virtual border down the Irish Sea for us to still be able to legally trade with the EU, and indeed with Northern Ireland, whose economy has been hammered, being stuck in a no man's land, neither in the EU nor legally within the trading bloc of the UK, and that's where it's been left ever since. It caused hell up at the time because Theresa May was relying on the DUP, who she'd bribed to keep her in power, who, despite the economic problems they were causing, didn't want a border in the sea. A hard border would have violated the Good Friday Agreement, likely resulting in a return to the Troubles, so that wasn't an option either. So the entire situation was stymied. Boris Johnson winning a majority in 2019 solved the problem. It was balls to the DUP and the ERG hard-right batshit brigade on his backbenches, and the border went down the Irish Sea. It's been a complete ball ache, though, for anyone still trading with Northern Ireland to cope with all the red tape this ended up resulting in. So a better solution has still been sought. Well, back in 2021, the EU came up with a proposal, and they said to get around the travel of UK goods into the EU in this way, into the single market via Northern Ireland, by suggesting a red route and a green route of goods in or out. Green goods into Northern Ireland could enter unchecked. No need to check them if they aren't entering the EU, is there? Label it up properly, job's a good one. Anything going any further would be red route and subject to the necessary single market checks. It had fixed the issue with trade to Northern Ireland. It seemed obvious. It would streamline trade to Northern Ireland again. The EU had suggested it, so it was perfectly agreeable, you would think. But no. The Tories under Boris Johnson wouldn't have a bar of it. It required them to do some work, you see. Implement some systems like labels, like tracking in order to pass muster. Well, that will cost money. Apparently it would cost businesses lots of money, as if the red tape they were enduring wasn't already doing that. This was when that whole trusted traders fudge of an idea came up, because, of course, nobody would rely on their paperwork, would they? Yeah, and Tories lie straight in bed. The other issue Brexiteers particularly had lies with the fact that any issues arising from red route produce crossing the border would be dealt with by the European Court of Justice. Well, it is entering the EU, after all. Why shouldn't it? And for the totally mad backbench ERG types of the Tory backbenches, and indeed Bozo himself, that was completely unacceptable. So Johnson binned the EU off. And so we now come to the lie, because guess what? Rishi Sunak's government have just proposed as a solution to the trade issues surrounding Northern Ireland. Red lanes and green lanes, not routes. They were unacceptable. Lanes, you understand. Yes, they've resurrected the idea the EU came up with and have claimed credit for it themselves. Whilst the Tories act like children going, no, I thought of it first. Aided and abetted by our pathetic mainstream media, the BBC, naturally, amongst others, the grown-ups in the EU will just nod, sigh, and agree to it, because they don't really care about the politics behind it all. Tories claim a win, except when people like me pop up and go, we see you. Of course, the risk to Sunak is the same frothy-mouthed madness that saw Johnson think twice, his supporters as they were. Sunak still has them to contend with. He's vulnerable as hell right now as well, with the 1922 committee set to change its rules over no confidence votes if the Tories do badly in May's local elections. Seems a certainty, especially when it's being reported they're struggling to even find candidates to stand, not even paper candidates. But the fact is, Brexit was supposed to settle this whole massive internal decades-long Tory party civil war over Europe, and yet it's still going on. Sunak actually backed Brexit, but has at least accepted the fact it's been a pig's ear from the get-go. And this concession, marketed as a Tory win, could make things a bit better for ordinary folk needing to trade with Northern Ireland, not to mention the ordinary folk of Northern Ireland itself. All these backbench half-wits are proving, though, is that it's party first, as it always is, and struggling traders can just go away and stop re-moaning. But the real dishonesty here is that it's not being sold to us as a minor trade deal agreement. It's being sold to us as a complete change to the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is a huge piece of legislation and isn't actually changing one iota. That's the message the mainstream Tory-centric media are selling us. That's completely dishonest. And it's frankly all time to try and give the Tories a desperately needed poll boost ahead of local elections when they can't move for outbreaks of sleaze and scandal. It's not a change to the protocol. It's a change on checks within the remit of the protocol. What the BBC and others have been up to, shilling for the Tories once more, is the equivalent of trying to sell someone the Palace of Westminster and ending up with a jigsaw off it instead. As for the European Court of Justice aspect, that could, I suppose, still be a stumbling block to Sunak. But if in need of Tory votes, a bit of bribery usually works, and I suppose the ERG might get offered some kind of a sweetener to get this over the line. But don't speak about the ECJ too loudly. Let's just keep shouting, "Successful change to the Northern Ireland Protocol!" as loudly and dishonestly as possible. Don't buy it. Don't be sucked in. The only thing that has really happened here is that the Tories have finally seen some sense and come around to an EU plan, an EU idea, an EU way of thinking to move things forward, and are the ones who really have conceded here, and rightly so. But don't tell their Brexiteer voters that ahead of those make or break May elections. They might not like it, and they might even take their votes elsewhere.